Black History Month you find
ridiculous.
Why?
You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Oh, come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? No, well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
No.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
What's good, family? Welcome to Pretty Realist. A lot of people thought that Black History Month was not going to happen. They swore that Donald Trump was going to get rid of it.
Will not be allowed to acknowledge, recognize, or celebrate Black History Month. Black History Month is canceled under Trump. CIA employees were told all resource and affinity groups are canceled. No Black History Month or MLK celebration or any other ethnic recognition months. DEI folks are to be fired rather than allowed to rotate to former offices. CIA is also apparently banning lanyards that have to do with affinity groups. Women's councils how to take down their website and cancel all event, including Women's History Month. They are also compiling a list of members within affinity groups. It's almost as if they're trying to rewind the time to 1940.
But before we dive in, let's take a moment to realize that Black history, it is American history. Because if we think about Black history, we always learn about the same people, which I'm not saying that their stories should not be told. But what about those stories that have not been told? These stories, this one that I'm getting ready to share with you today, definitely a story that I believe more Black Americans may need to pay attention to, because it will allow you to realize we didn't all come over here on boats. And the ones that did owned slaves that looked just like them. Today, I want to share a story about America's first Black slave owner. His name was Anthony Johnson. Black History Month, it separates us as if we are a separate group of people. It hasn't always been taught correctly in schools. For generations, textbooks always just taught us just the same old narrative, same curriculum. It's always been overlooked and always made us seem as if we was inferior to the next person. But by exploring figures such as Anthony Johnson, we could help correct those gaps and acknowledge the complexities of our shared past. So let's go ahead and check out this video, and then I'll be right back with the rest of my commentary.
The vast majority of African Americans in the United States were enslaved, in all of the states, not just the South. Our first person of note is Anthony Johnson, who was born in Angola and captured by Portuguese slave traders, and he was given the name Antonio. Then his captors sold him into the Atlantic slave trade. He sailed to Virginia in 1621 aboard the ship James. The Virginia muster, or census, of 1624 lists his name as Antonio, not given, and he was recorded as a Negro in the notes column and indentured. Antonio, later Anthony, was bought by a colonist in Virginia, but treated as an indentured servant, which was not unusual, and Antonio worked for a merchant at the Virginia Company. And
now notice that the guy who's talking said the word freedman. A lot of Black people in America do not know what the term freedman actually means. If you have never heard that terminology, please go look it up, because it's a very important name. I really want to do a video on freedmans. That is another group of people that a lot of us are descendants of. And it's important that we also learn their history. And if you have not done so yet, make sure you click that bell and subscribe to the channel.
And he became a Catholic. Johnson was sold as an indentured servant to a white planter named Bennett to work on his Virginia tobacco farm. Technically, he was not a slave, because the slave laws were not passed until 1661 in Virginia. So prior to that date, Africans were not officially considered to be slaves in that colony. According to the records kept by his benefactor and the existing documents, Anthony was nearly killed in the Indian Massacre of 1622 when the Powhatan Indians attacked colonists in the Tidewater region of Virginia. On Good Friday, they raided the settlement, including the Bennett farm, where Antonio worked, and killed 52 of the 57 men present. Antonio apparently fought back and was wounded and earned the esteem of his master. In 1623, a Black woman named Mary arrived aboard the ship Margaret and John. She was brought to work on the same plantation as Antonio, where she was the only woman present. Antonio and Mary married and lived together for more than 40 years. Around 1635, Antonio and Mary completed their indentured servitude, and Antonio changed his name to Anthony Johnson. He first entered the legal record as an unindentured free man when he purchased a calf in 1647. During this early period, free blacks enjoyed relative equality with whites, and about 20% of the free blacks in Virginia owned their own homes and property. In 1662, the Virginia colony passed a law that children in the colony were born with the social status of their mother. This meant that the children of slave women were born into slavery, even if their fathers were free, European, Christian, and white. This was a reversal of English common law, which held that the children of English subjects took the status of their father. The Virginia colonial government expressed the opinion that since Africans were not Christians, common law could not and did not apply to them, even if they converted, as Anthony Johnson did. On July 24, 1651, Johnson acquired 250 acres of land under the existing headright system when he bought the contracts of 5 indentured servants, one being his son, Richard Johnson. Under the headright system, if a man were to bring indentured servants over to the colonies, and in this particular case Johnson brought 5 servants, he was owed 50 acres a head for servant. The land in question was located on the Great Nassawatuk Creek, which flowed into the Punkateague River in Northampton County, Virginia. This was where Anthony Johnson operated his successful tobacco farm, and one of his indentured servants was John Casor, who became one of the first men to be declared indentured for life, effectively a slave. Under the 1645 Virginia Taxation Act, all Negro men and women and all other men from the age of 16 to 60 shall be judged tithable. So after a fire in 1652 caused him great financial damage to his property, he applied for relief in the courts and won. Back then, people were taxed, not property, but indentured servants and later slaves were taxed as property. It is unclear from the records why the Johnson women were exempted, but the change gave them the same social standing as white women who were not taxed. In the colonies back then, one was judged more on their religion as opposed to race or ethnicity in general, so until the advent of actual legal slavery, upward mobility was possible for many races. During the case, the justices noted that Anthony and Mary Johnson had lived in Virginia for over 30 years and were highly respected in their community. In fact, a 1653 Northampton County Court document lists Mary as Anthony's wife. By the 1650s, Anthony and Mary Johnson were farming 250 acres in Northampton County, while their 2 sons owned 550 acres. They also had additional indentured persons under contract, but the exact numbers are not known. His son Richard Johnson also had his own indentured persons, probably given to him by his father, who were effectively slaves with a shelf life. At some point, if contracted, they would have to be set free. In 1854, John Casor, who had been sentenced to indentured service for life.
Can you imagine somebody just saying that you have to work for them forever? Like, who the hell is you? That is insane. He also purchased white Irish slaves as well. So he didn't just own black slaves. So that's also going to be for a whole nother video. Let's continue.
For his escaping a previous owner in 1640, filed a suit against Johnson, claiming his indentured service had expired, and he went to work for Robert and George Parker. Johnson filed a freedom suit to get Casor back, but Parker won. What is amazing in retrospect was that Johnson, a black man, was not only able to file a petition to the court, but he was able to testify and give evidence in the court, which illustrates the rather egalitarian system in place at that time. However, Johnson appealed to the County Court of Northampton County, Virginia, and the court reversed its ruling and sent Casor back to Johnson in 1855, and Parker was forced to pay Johnson compensation. Then Casor made history, as he was probably the first person who was declared slave for life in Virginia. That means that his black owner, Anthony Johnson, was probably the very first slave owner in all of the colonies, himself a black man. There were both black and white indentured servants, the whites being the most Irish of all, who, like the blacks, were also sentenced to lifetime servitude before Casor's case. The difference was that the whites could eventually purchase their freedom in most cases. Therefore, Anthony Johnson was apparently not only the first African American whose right to own a slave for life was recognized in the colonies, he was therefore technically the first actual legal slave owner, regardless of being black or white, as established by the Virginia court. Soon afterwards, slavery was legal in all of the colonies. Later, Johnson moved his family to Somerset County, Maryland, and leased 300 acres for tobacco farming for 99 years, which he called Torrey's Vineyards. When Anthony Johnson died in 1670, that August, his plantation was given to Robert Parker, not to Johnson's children. The justification delivered by an all-right jury ruled that Anthony's land in Virginia that was given to his sons could be seized because he was a Negro and by consequence an alien. As a result, the 50 acres that Anthony had given to his son Richard wound up in the hands of his wealthy white neighbor George Parker. It didn't matter that Richard, a free man, had lived on the land with his wife and children for 5 years. A judge then had ruled that Anthony Johnson, as he was not a citizen of the colony because he was black, but he did own his own slaves, could maintain his property. What soon arrived after Johnson's death was a system of legal slavery in which enslavement was lifelong, hereditary, and based solely on race, and effectively established in all of the colonies in the beginning of the 18th century.
Wow. So I didn't know that. Not only was he the first black slave owner, he was the first slave owner, period. Damn. And they keep showing a picture of that man. That supposedly is not Anthony Johnson. But the weird thing about the whole situation is he did all of that. He owned all of that land, owned all of those slaves, won those court cases, and then he ended up passing away. And he still lost his land because he was black. So it didn't matter his status. He still was considered a black man, and he still didn't have no rights even though he owned slaves. Ain't that crazy? I just thought that that was an interesting story because it's something that we've never heard about in black history. Even when you look at pictures of slavery, we're the only ones that's always being picking cotton. You don't ever see nobody talking about that black people own slaves too. It's important that we realize that, like, we weren't the only people that were slaves. Slavery was something that was going on all across the world. I just told you that Irish people were slaves. In fact, they were the first slaves that came over here right before the Africans. History sometimes can be a bunch of lies agreed upon. And it's best that we start learning how to do our due diligence and doing our own research. And even when you think that you've learned the truth, it's always going to be another page that you're going to have to turn. Don't shoot the messenger. Only receive the message. If it's for you, receive it. If it's not, leave it. I'm going to go ahead and get up out of here. At the next video, I might actually talk about the white slave, but I have another one in the chamber that I really want to dig into because it's been a lot of talk regarding Black Americans and Native Americans. Like, they've been going at it heavy on TikTok, and I'm kind of interested. I've been doing a lot of research. I've been getting my homework together, reading treaties, reading all kinds of laws and acts. Now, I just always want to make sure I have my I's dotted and T's crossed before I talk about it, because it's always about facts, not feelings over here. I will see you all on the next video. Make sure you all like, share, comment, and subscribe. You all can follow me on TikTok at Pretty Realist. You can also check me out on IG at Pretty Realist 1, as well as X at Pretty Realist 1. I'm feeling a little bit better, so I'm sorry I'm a little late with this video. I was walking around here sounding like Big Ange. I was not about to record no video with my voice sounding deep like that. I will see you all next time.